Welcome back to the Retro Sports Gamer channel. And tonight we got some more Tecmo training with Mort and DPS. He's going to come tag team a Chargers Broncos matchup later. But first of all, we're going to talk about Redskins Vikings. This is a video requested by Fat Cheerleader Mark from TecmoBowl.org. And basically what he's trying to do is create a ROM where there's equal teams. So the players have the exact same attributes.
Oh, nice.
So you can really figure out who has, because with that, then you have perfect matchups. So his request to us was to say, who do you guys think are the most perfectly even matchups to call in a tournament in, like, the Madison typical format? So we got 6 matchups for you here today. We're not going to start with Broncos Chargers. So Matt, if you could update that overlay. We're going to start with Redskins Vikings. All right, so first of all, between the Redskins and the Vikings, they have the same, the quarterback has the same pass control, which is that 44. That's pretty much like an average pass control. So you really don't know what you're going to get with Mark Rippon or Wade Wilson. So it's kind of hit or miss.
There's also sometimes I do use Stan Humphries. He has 13 MS. Mark Ripken has 6 MS. And I mean, you're going to get picked off either way by Minnesota secondary. So sometimes if you want to scramble a little better, you might do that. Another possibility.
So the running back disparity isn't that much. Ernest Biner's got the 50 max speed. And then you have Herschel Walker with the 44 max speed. A little bit of hit power, but it's not going to do much for you unless he goes into excellent condition. But you don't have too much disparity at running back. Of course, the Redskins are a little bit more stacked overall at wide receiver, but the Vikings have their one superstar, which is Anthony Carter, 75 receptions, 56 max speed. And then looking at the Redskins, you got a 3-headed monster. You got Art Monk,
who has the 38 hitting power, which is very useful if you want to put him at tight end at sometimes. And I think he's pretty much the only receiver with high hitting power on this game. Everybody else is pretty much at 13. Gary Clark is a little slower but catches the ball reliably. And Ricky Sanders, and as we've said many times, just because he's in a running back position, he's not a running back, he's a receiver. And not a lot of receptions, but that 56 MS is more important.
Yeah, so you're a little bit more stacked offensively on the Redskins team, and but that's made up with the Vikings defense to make this more of an even matchup, because the Redskins do have 2 go-to guys at the corner. Darrell Green, 75 max speed, 44 interceptions, so that's not too high. And then you got Martin Mayhew with that 63 max speed, 69 interceptions. So those are your star players on the defense. Is there anything else you want to highlight on the Redskins defense?
Not really that much. They're pretty near average, but which means they're hard to use. There's not much going on with these guys. I mean, defensive lineman doesn't matter much. The other 2 safeties are high in interceptions, but mainly the Minnesota defense has a lot more parts to it, and the other advantage is Joey Browner, the stud defensive back, is at a safety position, whereas the Redskins, your stud defensive back is in a cornerback position where a lot of the sweep plays are ran at him. And then, of course, you have Carl Lee as a cornerback who's also very good. Not as much of interceptions, but it's also another very good option. And then you got a couple good linebackers here in Millard and Merriweather, who's 44 interceptions, is the second highest INT ability for a linebacker in the game. I'm pretty sure only the Jets have a player higher.
No, and the Giants.
Oh, the Giants, too.
So he's
of course,
like third.
I forgot about Gary Reasons. Yeah, third. And then, of course, Chris Dolman, too, is also usable, 31 interceptions in case extra guy in coverage here and there. But the one thing is, though, with the Vikings is that you might think, oh, their defense is way better, but I don't want to forget about Reggie Lutland and Ray Berry. Ray Berry.
Yeah,
No, I got that wrong. I mean, Fullington is decent, just not a lot of interceptions. Same with Rutland. They're decent, but these work out 50 MS with Yeah, it might seem like these guys are fast with 50 ms, but that rushing power is big for defense. And that turns them into slow.
Yeah, and even looking at their special teams, the kicker's range, the Vikings have a 67-yard range, and the Redskins have a 68-yard range. So even the kickers are pretty similar. Looking at the offensive line,
I think they both have really good offensive lines.
The Vikings are pretty good there. Yeah, they have 3 guys that are above a 60, and then we know the Redskins' offensive line is stacked. So they're pretty even there as well. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I don't like about this matchup personally is which way the quarterback goes kind of dictates how well you're going to do. When Rippon's good and he's on throwing to those 3 wide receivers, he could throw all over the place, but sometimes he's just not hitting, and Wade Wilson's the same way. So I would say this is a perfectly even matchup. It's about, it's a middle skill level matchup to choose.
I mean, I would especially consider calling this playbook this matchup if you know the player you're playing against likes to use the I form plays, the plays like if you know he likes to use this type of playbook, because then the Vikings' advantage might be negated a little bit. The Vikings' one advantage in this is that you're going to have, if you use this running play, the RNS sweep, you're running, with the Vikings, you're running right at the best defensive player, Mayhew, of the Redskins.
All right, so let's move on to the next matchup. In the next matchup, we're going to take a look at, I would say, it's an advanced equal matchup, which is Lions-Bucks, because at the surface, they're both in the NFC Central. You figure the Lions are the better team. And that might not necessarily, that's probably true, but if you know what you're doing with the Bucks, this is an equal matchup, and it starts with the quarterbacks that have the equal maximum speed. So you got 2 scrambling quarterbacks. They're both tied for second fastest in the game behind QB Eagles. The advantage you have with the Buccaneers is the pass control of Vinny Testaverde. It's a 56, so that's going to be your advantage. His ball is a little bit lofty because he's only a 31 pass speed. The Lions on offense, they, of course, have the advantage of Barry Sanders. Rodney Peete is not he doesn't have good pass control, and that will work against you. Andre Ware, if you need to bring him in off the bench, he has similar max speed. So you could switch between those 2 guys. But so basically the Bucks offensively have the advantage of Vinny Testaverde's pass control, and then the Lions have the advantage of Barry Sanders' speed. At receiver, you do have a little bit more options with the Lions. You got Mel Gray,
Robert Clark, Richard Johnson. Even though he's slow, he'll catch it. And then a lot of depth, not a lot of hitting power on the whole team. And then with Tampa Bay, we go, and then just slower receivers. You got Carrier, who's a 44, and then sometimes you can even mess around, put Gary Anderson at receiver because he catches the ball well. And then they have a couple 38 MS, 138 MS running back. And then Ron Hall's actually pretty good tight end.
Yeah.
38 speed's pretty good for the tight end position in this
game. He's not bad. So let's take a look at the defenses. So I'd say overall, the Lions' defense is better. You have multiple options. Jerry Ball's fast. You could take him off the line. Also, Michael Colfer on the top side of the defense, 56 max speed. You could also put him in coverage with 31 interceptions. And then you have 2 other guys. Spielman, he's got that 56 hit power, 50 maximum speed. He'll break up some sweeps going through the line, so he's an option on defense. And then, of course, William White is your star defender, your go-to guy, 56 interceptions, 56 max speed. So the Lions certainly have more options on defense. Nothing huge in interceptions to really give Vinny Testaverde a scare, so that's still going to be a big advantage. Whereas on the other side, Tampa Bay has a lopsided defense, and your go-to guy, you just need to look at him, Wayne Haddix. That's 75 max speed, 75 interceptions. You'll be picking stuff off all over the field, especially with the low pass control quarterbacks of Rodney Peete and Andre Ware, and that's really why this is an advanced level equal team matchup, is because if the player using the Lions is not aware of how much Wayne Haddix can affect the game by getting picks, then he's going to have some trouble. Your really only other option on defense, I would say, to user control is Mark Robinson with 50 max speed and 56 interceptions. And it works out because he's on the opposite side of Wayne Haddix. Is there anything else in defense you want to talk about? Or
Defense were good. The offensive lines for both teams are pretty bad, especially Tampa Bay's the worst in the game, which helps you if you're Detroit, because in some games Detroit's defensive line with Jerry Ball is going to get some sacks, and then that could be big in a game. But then again, the Lions don't have a great offensive line, but lucky for them, Tampa Bay has nothing to take advantage. And there's actually a big difference in the kickers.
Yeah, the kicking range on these two guys, Detroit 65 yards on the kicking range. The Bucs have that 71 yards. So they have one of the better kickers in the game. So you do have an advantage in the kicking game. So, but I would say the more casual player probably doesn't understand that this is an equal matchup, but it really is. I've seen two guys in Chicago duking it out quite a bit with this matchup. Flo and Tecmo Bo did at one of the tournaments at Michael Anthony's, and then Flo won that one, and then Tecmo Bo returned the favor at Blono Tecmo when they faced off. So this is an equal matchup. It's more of an advanced one, but I would choose it for sure.
The key to this matchup is if odds are if you call it, you're probably going to be Tampa Bay. The other guy's going to lean towards Detroit. Your ability to contain the running game with Wayne Haddix, and that is going to be determine the game. Because if you can contain the running game and force more and more passing downs, that's when you're going to get the opportunity to take advantage of Wayne Haddix's ability. On offense, the other advantage Tampa Bay is going to happen is Vinny Testaverde can be frustrating because a lot of the defenses that work against other quarterbacks don't work against him because his slow passing speed, the ball just seems to go right over your defender's head. For example, on this play, there's a common bailout to throw on a guest play to throw it to the top receiver. If you stand in the right place with a defensive back, you're supposed to be able to cut that off. But Vinny Testaverde often, he'll just lofts it perfectly, and even though you're standing in perfect position, it does nothing for you.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that on a lot of shorter JJ passes that Vinny Testaverde's lob ball is just goes over your head even though you're in the right spot, which can be frustrating.
All right, so there's two matchups, 4 down to go. The next one, or 3 matchups actually we went through, 3 more to go. The next one is one that Green Magic picked.
It's going to be the Bears versus Dolphins. As he's still getting here today, we'll go over the Bears-Dolphins matchup. Basically, offense versus defense, passing versus running. And we'll start off with, I think Chicago is the better team, but of course the big weakness of Chicago, bad quarterbacks.
Really bad.
Mighty Mike Tomczak. But Neil Anderson is a stud. Johnny Bailey available to you as well. Brad Mustard. And then horrible receiving corps. The tight ends have blocking power, which is good. And then, of course, I think with Miami offense, I think we all heard of Dan Marino before at one point or another, and he's a stud in Tecmo. 6 MS, though, which could be an important thing in some games. I've seen that bite people in the butt before. Nobody ever uses Scott Mitchell. His running game is just a bunch of 38 MS running backs and a fullback who is very good hitting power. His receiving game pretty good. He's got Clayton and Duper and Farrell Edmonds as well. And also another good tight end, Jim Jensen. He seems to catch the ball a lot.
Super sub.
Yeah, the super sub.
So a couple things I wanted to add offensively. It is a run versus pass matchup, but the Dolphins have a sneaky good running game because their offensive line is so stacked. Mm-hmm. So you can bet that your opponent's going to guess pass more, and then you could get some runs, especially if your running back's going a little bit higher condition. On the Bears side of things, putting Neil Anderson at wide receiver seems to be the popular choice because he has that 50 receptions, and then that 50 running speed, which is odd, so he can burn some guys. If you do this, the Bears can be also sneaky good in the passing game. So even though one team's really run heavy and the other team is really pass heavy, they can both do it both ways. So they're not balanced, and they're equal on offense because of that.
And then, that's pretty much the surprise element is the Miami running game and the Chicago passing game. If you make a couple of match changes, all of a sudden the game changes for you. On defense, now the defense of the Bears, of course, everybody remember, this is basically the leftover for the '85 Super Bowl. Richard Dent is a monster and is actually a very good, useful guy in coverage. Perry's just slow and strong. You also have Mike Singletary. Not much interceptions, but one of the best linebackers in the game. And then very rare to linebacker 3. And then, of course, the best secondary in the game is on the Bears. You got Stimson with 69 interceptions, Woolford with 63 interceptions, Carrier with the most interceptions in the game at 81, and Sean Gale with 56. Only weakness of the Bears' defense is that their secondary, despite all the ability to catch the ball, is slower.
Yeah, so that's one thing I wanted to highlight. Because the Bears do have all the interceptions to deal with Dan Marino's 69 pass control, but they're not as fast as a guy like Rod Woodson, Wayne Haddox, Deion Sanders. And with Dan Marino's fast pass speed, you could sneak some passes in there in front of the Bears secondary because they're all pretty. They have good, solid speed, but they're not the fastest corners in the game. So you can do that with the Dolphins, and that's something you have to look at because you're not going to get as many covered catches against the Bears because they do have the best interceptions on any team overall.
Now the Miami defense is also pretty underrated and pretty good. And at the linebacker position, John Offerdale is probably the second best linebacker 3 in the game, with Singletary being a little better. But Offerdale has that nice advantage of the 31 interceptions, which is cool. And then they have a pretty good secondary. Now this is the one weak link in the secondary at the top cornerback. The bottom cornerback just a little bit better. But Lewis Oliver and Jarvis Williams are basically the same exact player.
And I like how those two safeties line up to defend the running offense. You want those two safeties. They're the most flexible players to use on the field. Since they're exact same and they have good ratings, you can just switch between those two guys and do a pretty good job of slowing down the Bears' running game.
Heck, they even both have mustaches. They almost think of pick the same player profile. That would have been really bad. But and that's the other big advantage is 56 INTs is going to dominate both of the quarterbacks the Bears have. So the Bears, every throw you are taking a risk if they're not wide open, if you're not sure of it. But I mean, sometimes you got to take a risk to win in this game. But the Bears, definitely that Miami secondary might get more interceptions. They may not have the big INT numbers, but the quarterback doesn't have a lot of pass control.
And in their special teams, with the kicker, the Dolphins have the advantage. They have a range of 60 or 71 yards. Kevin Butler, Butthead, only has 66 yards. So you got a little advantage there for the Dolphins. On the offensive line, we know that the Dolphins have a stacked offensive line. And
this one isn't too bad either. The 50 hitting power is fine. Yeah. There's nothing bad.
Not as stacked, but not bad.
And then that's the one thing. Yeah, Miami is going to make this is not as good of a kicker compared to the Miami kicker. And the punters, who cares about the punters? So let's go on to the next matchup.
Yeah, I would say just in closing with that matchup, you have to be skilled in both running and passing if you're going to pick it. Otherwise, if you get the wrong team in that matchup, you could end up getting smoked. So just make sure that you're good with both running and passing game, and you're familiar with both teams.
Now, the next matchup is one I've personally chosen because I think it's a toss-up almost every time I call it. In fact, I don't call it because it's hard to find the advantages what team's going to have. And that's the Dallas Cowboys versus the Denver Broncos. And now, we'll start with Denver. Denver had John Elway, but John Elway had a bad year, so he has 31 pass control. The 25 MS is pretty good, but actually his backup at times could be considered a better quarterback with not as much passing speed and more passing control. And so you could use both in this matchup. Now, both teams have fast running backs. Bobby Humphrey, I think everybody's familiar with the Dallas Cowboys, having Emmitt Smith, and also another quarterback we're familiar with, but this was his second year or maybe even rookie year.
I think rookie year.
Rookie year probably for Troy Aikman. So the 44 pass control, at times you got to keep in mind Laufenberg and good and Aikman and bad, you can even be using your backup on this team.
Yeah, I would say the one advantage you have with the Broncos is that you can scramble with Elway if you leave him in the game. Also, you do have a faster running back. So on the surface level, it seems like Denver does have a slight advantage offensively because of that. Their wide receivers.
Yes, they do have the better wide receivers. With let's look at the Dallas one. So for 38, Irvin is a 44. Novacek is another 44. And Denver's 44 and 50 MS. And their tight end's pretty decent too. It's not bad for this game. And then, not bad, yeah. So you see, at first, it does seem like that. Denver does seem like it has that slight advantage. And the key thing is how this game's going to play out. It goes a lot of times towards the defensive side of the ball and even the offensive line. Like Denver's weakness is it doesn't have a great offensive line.
Yeah, that could get eaten up in the wrong matchup.
Especially these key players, center, guard are all terrible.
And Dallas's defensive line is a little bit underrated. It's actually pretty good. I think most of the guys are above average, so that's something to look out for. I mean,
yeah, but that's good enough. That's good enough at times in this game for what you need to slow them down, depending on your playing calls. And then even the linebacker position on both teams are pretty good. And games do happen to go to a lot of linebackers. And got Fletcher, Munford, Brooks, and Mecklenburg about the same. Ah, man with money.
Look at he's handing out envelopes for March Madness. Here we go, Brian.
That's
all
what
right,
you do.
Brian, we're in the middle of a training video, so we'll get with you in just a moment.
All right. So about even. There's not a lot of interceptions in the linebacker core on either team, and the defensive back. Now this is the key. Dallas has a slight advantage in the defensive backfield. I mean, Hendricks is a very fast player. Basically, he's a slightly slower version of Darryl Green. And Isaac Holt is another very good underrated player who has a lot of interceptions. That 50 INT isn't a lot, but that's more than enough to make your day a headache if you make a bad throw with Elway. Same with even that 44 Ray Horton has is enough to make a headache for Elway if Elway makes the wrong throw. Same even for James Washington. If Elway makes a wrong throw, the 50 INT should be enough to JJ INT. And so you can't make any mistakes. And then the Denver secondary has hitting power, but 44 interceptions. Smith is your best option. Atwater's a beast, but he doesn't really pick the ball up. And then Braxton is slow. And then you got Wyman. Wyman isn't that good.
Their interceptions are really poor on the Broncos side of things, so you can get away with throwing some balls up with Troy Aikman's 44 pass control more so than you would on other teams. So that gives you an advantage just passing the ball for sure. And then, of course, the Broncos have the
the LB4 too.
The linebacker 4, the bottom linebacker lurch on certain run plays up the middle, so don't forget about that. 56 max speed. If you have at least that, you can pull off that diving tackle to break up some plays, so keep that in mind. As far as their special teams, their kickers, Denver has one of the better kickers in the game with a 71 kicking range, and then you have the Cowboys with a 67, so they have a slight edge there. Did we talk about the offensive lines?
The Broncos we did, but not Dallas's. I think Dallas's is pretty decent. Dallas back in the Super Bowl era was arrow. Now the center isn't, but the guards are good enough. But even there, you can see the tackles are great. But even there is a weakness. The center, at times, and the Denver defensive line is decent, but it's still way better than what Denver has. It's just enough, these contrasting pieces, they're just enough to keep the game. There's no ridiculously obvious advantage for either team, really, in this. I mean, one team has a slightly faster running back. The other team doesn't have the secondary. Denver doesn't have a secondary, really, to stop the Dallas passing game. If you just want to throw it deep, you can probably get away with it against them. The same thing with Denver. You got the running quarterback, but if you're not careful with that running quarterback and he's throwing in coverage, you may have wished you would put in the backup and just thrown it deep because he's less likely to get intercepted. So it's just eventually, like, this game to me is just a toss-up. You're just flipping a coin, and just whoever has more skill or maybe more luck too, though. Just depends.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Packers-Browns.
Yeah, second to last matchup. Mort's favorite team, not in Tecmo Super Bowl, but just in the NFL, is the Packers. So the Packers-Browns, when I brought this matchup to Mort, he said basically it's a JJ fest. You have a lot of similarities between these two teams. First of all, let's start with the quarterbacks. Don Majkowski, the Magic Man, he's got that 25 max speed. The passing speed's a little low, 38, but the 50 pass control, pretty solid, about average to above average there. The Packers are going to have an advantage in the running game. Woodside's got a little bit more speed than anything the Browns got going on. Especially if Woodside can go into a good or excellent condition, that's going to be an advantage for them. They both have one star receiver, Sterling Sharp. Sterling Sharp has the 50 max speed, 75 receptions. So with that higher receptions and the combination of Majkowski's pass control with that gets pretty close to the QB Browns, Webster Slaughter combo, but not quite there. I think it's like 2 notches below. You want to talk a little bit about Michael Haddox on the Packers offense because he does have that 94 hitting power. You can use that, especially against the Browns' poor defense. That can be a little bit of an advantage for them, but he's pretty slow, 25 max speed. So he's not going to bust you down the field any big gains, but in close yardage situations, he's someone you want to look at. Cleveland, of course. QB Browns is Bernie Kosar. He's probably top 5 quarterback in the game. 75 pass control, that is great. That's one of the top in the game. So he's not going to throw as many picks as other guys. 44 passing speed, so not quite throwing darts, but he also has a 25 max speed. So you got 2 quarterbacks who can scramble all over the field. And, of course, we know the accuracy of passing didn't get programmed in the Tecmo Super Bowl for the NES. And then Kevin Mack, he has that 88 hit power, so he's similar to Haddox. The Packers also have a poor defense, so you can take advantage of that. He can bust through some things, but only at 31 max speed, but that's still faster than Haddox. Eric Metcalf's going to be your fastest running back, 38. Nothing special. Look for his condition. And, of course, Webster Slaughter with that 63 receptions is your star receiver. And he's not as fast as Sterling Sharp, though. He's only 38 max speed, so a little bit longer to get down the field. The Packers could threaten you with Bob Nelson on the defensive line, but other than that, you should be okay with QB Brown's scrambling ability. Other than that, they don't have anything too much to look at offensively.
There's a couple minor things on the offense. Really, Newsome, you mentioned, right, kind of in this match, at this level of the game, that's actually useful. But really on the Packers, they do have a little depth at running back. That's Herman Fontenot is a pretty good receiving back for this end of the game. And Darren Thompson is just another good backup. But Fontenot, I often have to use him at a receiving position because he has more MS than anything you're going to get on the backups from these guys. As you can see, a lot of backup receivers on the bottom end of the game are slow. Ed West is decent tight end. Jackie Harris was actually a better player than this, I believe. May have been theirs last year. I think the Packers' offensive line is weak. Yeah, and I think the Browns have a decent offensive line though. Better than the Packers. Yeah, better. That's pretty good. Better than the Packers, definitely.
Yeah, it's below average still, but better than the Packers. In the kicking game, the Browns got that 66 range. Packers a little better, 69 kicking range. So could kick beyond the 50. So let's look at the defenses between the two teams.
The Browns don't have the best two players on the Browns. Mike Johnson is a very good linebacker, but is low on interceptions. And Frank Minifield is probably their best defensive back. Pretty good speed, not a lot of interceptions. But then the other cornerback is horrible. Gash isn't much better. And Felix Wright is decent on interceptions, but very slow. The rest of the linebacker core, Clay Matthews Sr., this was probably around his last year of his career. I think he had a Hall of Fame career. But I'm pretty sure he went to the Hall of Fame, but this was the last year of his career. Grayson is not much. Blaylock is kind of decent. But the defensive line is notable because they all have some hitting power. Not that they're fast, but they do have some hitting power.
I think the biggest problem with the Browns' defense is the way it's laid out. Mike Johnson and Frank Minfield are both on the bottom.
Yeah.
So that forces you to use Tony Blaylock. The one good thing about him, he's only a 44 max speed, but he does have that 38 interceptions for a linebacker.
That is a useful point. And then the Packers' defense does have a couple studs. Like one of the defensive line studs, really for his rushing power. 69 rushing power, and Bob Nelson could be deadly at times. The Browns, I think their center was kind of weak. And then the linebacker, Tim Harris, 56 speed, only 19 interceptions, but a very good line, LB1. The rest of the linebacking core is Stephen, at least he could pick the ball off, but he's so slow. And then the defensive backfield, Holmes is decent. Mark Lee on the bottom's horrible. Cecil is just slightly better, and Murphy is decent. So you got two decent guys, Holmes and Murphy. So this is really going to be a pass fest because there's not really much either of these defenses are going to do to be able to stop the passing game in this.
Yeah, so like we said at the very beginning of this matchup, it can turn into a JJ fest. A lot of deep balls just chucked down the field. So there might be a little less skill involved in this matchup. So I would.
It's even, Stevens.
Yeah, it's even. So I would say this is more of a entry level matchup for someone who wants to call an even matchup between these two teams.
You just have to be careful when you pick matchups like this. I say the one thing is, there's not a lot of defenses. I could throw the ball. But if your opponent gets lucky on you in these matchups and all of a sudden you're down 2 scores, it's hard to get defensive stops to get back in the game.
All right, so we're bringing in DPS for the matchup you see called a ton at tournaments, and that is the Broncos and the Chargers.
This is actually the matchup I chose for my first game in Madison this year, facing a guy that I had no idea who he was, but he had a nickname, so I thought he might be pretty decent. Turns out he was. He actually plays online a lot. He's from South Dakota, and so he really thought he was going to beat me. He really was convinced he was going to win the game. It was very close, actually. Both QBs. Here you notice he has 31 pass control for Elway. Obviously, he has the 25 max speed, which gives him the advantage. That's really the big advantage they have in this matchup of anything. Kubiak also has a 38 pass control. If we go to San Diego, they have the same pass control, 31 for the starter and 38 for the backup. They both have pass control for Elway and Tolliver are also the same, the 81.
Yeah, if you stick with Tolliver and Elway, they both have that laser passing speed, so that's a similarity between the two teams. 81 pass speed versus 75 Elway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Obviously, the difference is the max speed for those two guys, 25 to 13. I believe these two are the same. Vlasic and Kubiak also both have 13s with that, so they're basically very similar quarterbacks, starters and backups for those. These teams though have very similar things. There's a couple of advantages for the teams, but if you look at the running backs, Humphries is 63 MS, ball control 50, hitting power 30, nothing special there. And you go back to Butts, Marion Butts, same thing, 63, 30 hit power, ball control 50. Receptions go to Humphrey a little bit. I think it's 25 to 38, so you get a little bit extra receptions for Humphrey there. So it's his advantage a little bit, but very similar types of players there. Yeah. Your best receiver for San Diego, Anthony Miller.
And he's a star receiver compared to really what the Broncos have. I don't think they have anyone that high in receptions.
Actually, they do.
They do.
So if you look to Mark Jackson,
that's why you're the pro on this matchup.
Almost the exact same stats.
69, yeah.
Max speed's the same, reception's the same, ball control's the same. They're almost the exact same player, just change names. So that's one of the things I looked for when I was not starting the stream was this. I was very surprised to see that they had the exact same thing here. People think Vance Johnson's the number one receiver at first glance, but
he has a 51 max speed, 56 receptions, not bad, but that's not helping Elway enough. The 69 would help him for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically you think Anthony Miller is better than Mark Jackson, but he's really not. So you got to take a look at that.
Exactly. So you go to the Chargers; they don't have a second option here. 44 receptions, 38. Quinn Early's at 44. That's pretty much what you're stuck with these guys. So
yeah, it's pretty much going to be get the passes in there quick, and it's going to be a running matchup.
Which is kind of why you want to go with Elway, even though he's lower passing control, because you need to make up for the timing.
And this is why you pick this matchup, because you're going to get similar stuff.
Yeah, basically you're getting what you get.
So you know what you're going to get either way.
One thing that the Broncos don't have that the San Diego Chargers have that you may never use, but maybe you do if you're a running player, is they're a backup tight end here with a 63 hit power. One thing that came up in the matchup during the game was that I didn't realize this guy was so good with that. So if you think you're gonna run the ball over somebody, it might be worth it, because the Broncos are pretty weak on the D line and the linebacking core.
So we got a question from the guy who requested the video, Mark. He said, "I've seen people bench Elway when his conditions drop, and Kubiak is up. Your thoughts?"
I mean, agreed. Same thing. If you're talking about the 31 pass control for Elway here, if that goes down, if he goes in a bad condition, it's, I think 25. And if Kubiak's good, he could be up to 44. And then same thing with the maximum speed. He'll be 19. Elway will be down to 19. So same speed, better pass control. Obviously, the passing speed is different there at that point. But I think you'd have to go with Kubiak if he's bad and Kubiak's good.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I would do it if there's a condition change.
Even bad versus average, maybe, yeah.
Unless your whole game's predicated off Elway's max speed, but even then it might be at 19, which might not be enough for you to leave him in the game.
19 and 13 there.
So let's take a look at the defense.
So defense here, as Mort was saying, pretty much you got Atwater and Smith. These are your two big guys here. So Atwater has a hitting power of 69, and that's the best one on their team for sure. And then Smith, you get the interceptions a little bit more, but it's still only a 44. However, again, Tolliver has a 31 pass control, so that is pretty good against him. So it's actually, he's a pretty good player for that.
Yeah. But I would say one of the advantages the Chargers have is their defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gilbert is one of the best defensive players in the game with that 69 interceptions, 63 max speed. And that's super dangerous with the QB's pass control that the Broncos got going on.
Yeah, basically to sum up the matchup, it's Gilbert's interceptions and speed versus Elway's speed. That's pretty much what you're going to get.
That's the biggest difference.
If you can run the ball and scramble with Elway, you'll win. If otherwise Gilbert's going to pick you off 4 or 5 times, and you're going to lose.
Yeah, you have a couple other options too. Like Seal's good at the other corner, not as high interceptions, but he has that max speed. So you could switch off between the two corners on defense. And then Leslie O'Neal is also a stud.
Yeah.
56 max speed, 63 hit power. But because he's linebacker 1, he doesn't have the same advantage of the lurch linebacker
agreed.
4 like Simon Fletcher. So
you get Plummer with the 69 hit power, a little slower with the 44, but if they're running the ball over, you might be a guy to beat.
Yeah, he's a good guy to bust in through the line with that 69 hit power. Looking at their kicking games, we already talked about the Broncos. They have a good kicker, 71-yard range. And the Chargers have even a better kicker with John Carney, 72. So they're equal there as well. These two teams
within a yard.
They're good. They're as close as you get to a carbon copy with a couple advantages each way. The offensive line, though, I think of the Chargers is better.
It is much better, actually. You see 56 hit power, 50, 69 there for the right guard, 63 for the left tackle, and 56 for Thompson. Definitely big advantages there. You go to the Broncos, much lower.
Yeah.
44, 44, 44, 56, and 50. And then you go to the D-line, and you'll see the rush power here, 31, 44 hit power, 31, 44, and 31, 50. Very bad D-line. So the Chargers have a better O-line. Broncos have a worse D-line. Chargers D-line is better. Broncos O-line is worse. So you get definitely the trenches advantage over the Chargers as well.
I would pick this matchup if you want to run. That's the best way to describe it. Also, if you like quarterbacks with fast pass speed, I had this matchup. I called this matchup at not this last Madison, but the Madison before versus Airborne Tempo, and I figured like I could out tap him, and that doesn't happen that much for me. So I went with this matchup, and it came down to the last play, but he really used that Elway max speed to his advantage. He actually chose the Broncos over the Chargers, even though most would say the Chargers have a slight advantage.
That's true.
So
you'll see even in this matchup, which is a lot less important to people, but their strong safeties and right tackle both have the same MS. So you get same kick return speed and punt return speed. You don't even have any advantage in that one as well. So again, pretty even there. You get the trenches matchups, goes to the Chargers, speed for Elway, and then picks for Bird and the speed of Bird.
Yeah, we didn't bring up the kick return game too much in the other matchups, but I don't think there's any huge advantages with these teams.
The Bears won the kick return game. The Bears have a pretty good kick return game, but most of those other teams, they don't get much of the kick.
Get Mustard back there.
Yeah. So, that pretty much wraps up our most even matchups. We could probably do another series of this. If you guys disagree with us, we're definitely we look for disagreements. So leave the comments after this video uploads.
We definitely got some other ones, like there's Jets Saints, there's Dallas Phoenix, there's Minnesota San Diego,
Lions Vikings.
Yeah, we'll do another series of this in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I could just keep going. I could just keep going and going. Bills Giants.
Yeah, we thank Mark for getting us to do this, because we're gonna bring some training episodes back before we start playing at D-Men Tap. So thanks for requesting this. For the guys who checked this out live, definitely appreciate it. And Mark says, Tom, you should play Mort now. He's had a few beers.
I don't drink. Mark, I don't drink. That's so.
And Deontay's saying he asked for an autograph from Mort at Tecmo Madison. I doubt that happened. Did that happen? Any autographs this year?
Wait.
Yeah.
No, wait. You weren't at Tecmo Madison, dude.
They'll give you
When's that coming out? I'm not
you
sure.
didn't read the other part of
All
the
right, guys. Well,
I think that was not. Pretty sure that didn't happen.
And I do give out autographs. And why people want it?
An elite
You know
QB.
how hard it is for me to sign Mort?
Elite QB.
Don't ever do it.
Exactly.
Elite QB saying they're remaking Tecmo Bowl for PS4 and Xbox. I haven't seen anything on that. We'll look that up. But
who said that? Elite QB.
Elite QB, and he seems to like Mort a lot. He says some crazy stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to start playing some Tecmo games after this. We're going to end this video, but we're coming back with some hardcore Tecmo action. Lurching's legal, all subs legal. So we're going to start doing that tonight and start playing that way up until the hardcore tournament. We'll mix up some regular matchups too, but that's going to do it. Let's play some Tecmo. Have a good night.